The rain hammered against the hospital window like accusations, each drop a reminder of all the times Sarah Mitchell had been too busy, too distracted, too focused on her own survival to notice anyone else's pain. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the parking lot blur into watercolor streaks, and wondered if this was what rock bottom felt like, standing in a children's ward at 2 a.m, realizing that the life she'd been so desperately trying to save was the one thing that had been slowly killing her all along. It started 3 months earlier, on an ordinary Tuesday that had no business changing everything. Sarah had been late for work again, her coffee going cold in the cup holder as she wove through Chicago traffic with the aggressive precision of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe. Her phone buzzed incessantly with emails, calendar reminders, messages from her boss about the Henderson account that could make or break her career at the marketing firm. At 34, she'd built an impressive resume and an empty apartment that echoed, with the silence of a life postponed. She barely noticed the woman standing at the crosswalk, bundled against the November wind with a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." God bless. Sarah had trained herself not to look, not to feel the uncomfortable tug of conscience that came with eye contact. But as the light changed, something made her glance over. Maybe it was the way the woman was smiling despite everything. Or maybe it was the small girl beside her, no more than 7, holding her mother's hand like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. The girl was staring directly at Sarah through the car window, not with the desperate plea Sarah had learned to avoid, but with something else entirely, kind of knowing that seemed impossible for someone so young. Their eyes met for maybe 3 seconds before traffic moved again, but in that brief moment, Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. She told herself to forget it. She had the Henderson meeting in 40 minutes, a presentation that represented 6 months of work, and absolutely no time for the complications of compassion. But halfway to the office, Sarah did something she'd never done before. She turned the car around. Finding them again took 20 minutes of circling blocks, her heart pounding with an urgency she couldn't explain. When she finally spotted the woman and child on the corner of Madison and Wells, Sarah pulled over so quickly that the driver behind her honked in irritation. She grabbed her wallet, jumped out, and approached them with her hand extended. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. Can I buy you both breakfast? There's a diner right there." The woman looked at her with eyes that held more stories than Sarah could imagine. "You don't have to." "I know," Sarah interrupted. "But I want to, please." The girl squeezed her mother's hand, and something in that simple gesture nearly undid Sarah completely. They agreed. Inside the warm diner, over plates of pancakes and eggs, Sarah learned their names. The woman was Jennifer, 31, and her daughter was Emma. They'd been living in their car for 6 weeks after Jennifer's restaurant job disappeared, and medical bills from Emma's asthma. Treatments ate through their savings. Jennifer spoke without self-pity, focusing instead on Emma's progress in the school she still attended every day, walked there from wherever they'd parked the night before. "She wants to be a veterinarian," Jennifer said, pride lighting up her worn face. "She's got this thing with animals, always has. Even when we had nothing. She'd save half her sandwich for the stray cats in our old neighborhood." Emma nodded solemnly, her small fingers wrapping around her hot chocolate. "Animals need someone to take care of them. Mama says everybody needs somebody." That simple truth, spoken by a child who had every reason to be bitter, hit Sarah like a physical blow. Here was this little girl, essentially homeless, still thinking about who else might need help. And what had Sarah been doing? Chasing promotions, working 60-hour weeks, building a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt hollow the moment she came home to her expensive, empty apartment. Sarah missed her meeting that day. Instead, she spent hours on the phone, calling shelters, nonprofits, and a social worker friend she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. By the end of the week, she'd helped Jennifer secure a spot in a transitional housing program and connected her with a hiring manager at a hotel chain, looking for experienced restaurant staff. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. But something else happened during those weeks. As Sarah helped Jennifer navigate applications and interviews, as she brought Emma books about animals and sat with her while she read them aloud, Sarah began to remember who she used to be. Before the corporate ladder and the crushing weight of performance metrics, she'd wanted to help people. She'd majored in social work before switching to business, convinced by well-meaning advisors that she needed to be practical about her future. The irony wasn't lost on her now. She'd spent a decade being practical, building security, accumulating things she didn't need, and somehow ended up feeling more vulnerable than Jennifer, who owned almost nothing but seemed to possess something. Sarah had lost a sense of purpose that went beyond herself. 3 weeks before Christmas, Jennifer started her new job. Emma drew Sarah a picture of her favorite animal, a giraffe, with "Thank you for being our angel" written in careful, uneven letters across the top. Sarah hung it on her refrigerator, and every time she looked at it, then came the call that changed everything again. Jennifer's voice on the phone was steady, but Sarah could hear the tremor beneath it. Emma had collapsed at school. Severe asthma attack. She was at Children's Memorial Hospital, stable but critical. They needed to keep her for observation, maybe longer. The medical bills, even with the emergency Medicaid Jennifer had finally qualified for, would be substantial. Sarah didn't hesitate. She drove straight to the hospital, stopping only to withdraw the money she'd been saving for a vacation she never took. When she arrived, Jennifer was in the hallway outside Emma's room, and the look on her face was something. Sarah hoped she'd never have to understand from the inside, a mother's fear that prayers might not be enough. "I can't lose her," Jennifer whispered, and Sarah wrapped her arms around this woman who'd become so much more than a charity, case, or a good deed. She'd become a friend, a mirror showing Sarah what strength really looked like. Emma recovered, but slowly. Sarah visited every day after work, then started leaving work early, then realized that the Henderson, account and all, those urgent emails felt absurdly small compared to the sight of Emma's smile when she walked into that hospital room. Her boss wasn't happy about her sudden shift in priorities, but for the first time in her career, Sarah discovered she didn't care. Standing at that hospital window at 2 in the morning, watching Emma finally sleep peacefully while Jennifer dozed in the chair beside her daughter's bed, Sarah understood what had really happened 3 months ago at that crosswalk. She hadn't saved them. They'd saved her. The next morning, Sarah handed in her resignation. 6 weeks later, she'd enrolled in a program to complete her social work degree. She sold her expensive apartment, moved into something smaller, and discovered that the life she was building now, messier, less impressive on paper, filled with other people's emergencies and needs, was the one she'd been searching for all along. Emma was released from the hospital with a new treatment plan and a new lease on life. Jennifer and her daughter moved into a small apartment with a park nearby where Emma could watch the dogs play. And Sarah learned that the moment you stop building walls around your heart, the whole world becomes bigger, richer, more impossibly beautiful than you ever imagined. Years later, when people asked Sarah about the moment her life changed, she always thought of that little girl at the crosswalk, holding her mother's hand, looking at her with eyes that somehow saw past all of Sarah's carefully constructed defenses. Emma had taught her the most important lesson anyone ever could, that being human means showing up for each other, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when it costs something, especially when you think you have nothing left to give. Because sometimes the person you're saving is yourself, and sometimes the smallest hand reaching out can pull you back from an edge you didn't even know you were standing on. That's the power of kindness. It doesn't just change the person who receives it. It transforms the one brave enough to offer it, reminding them that beneath all the noise and hurry and self-protection, we're all just looking for the same thing. Someone who sees us, someone who stays, someone who reminds us that we matter. In the end, we're all just trying to be someone's answer to a silent prayer. And if we're lucky, if we pay attention, if we're willing to turn the car around and do the inconvenient thing, we might discover that they were ours all along.